Market update. I'm going straight to the point this week, catching you up on what's happening with all the key players across basketball, hockey, and baseball. Let's data dive. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Data Dive. My name is Tyler Nethercott, better known as Teapot, and this week I'm getting right into it. I thought it would be fun to do a market update. I haven't really done this, periodically, and I've been doing a lot of videos on previews of things like the MLB season, NHL playoffs, and the NBA playoffs, so I thought it would be great to look back now that we're 30 to 45 days into each of those to see how the key players are performing. So without further ado, I want to show you how I use market movers in a few different ways to get a sense of what's going on with the market and with those players. So let's start out with the NBA. NBA playoffs obviously underway. Some surprises, at least for a lot of people. The Mavericks, upsetting the Suns and taking them out in Game 7 after a 2-game lead by the Suns. Yet another 2-0 lead for a Chris Paul team that ends up not making it through to the next round. And then obviously in the East, you had that all the way down to Game 7 between the Bucks and the Celtics pulling it out. And so let's take a look and see. These are kind of all the key players that we had heading into the playoffs, or I may have missed a few. If I did, you can let me know down in the comments, but I've got them all filtered. I'm on price movements by player, graded cards only, just because that helps with the, comparing apples to apples. All these key players I selected in the filters, and then I'm looking at specifically their rookie cards. I like to look at their rookie cards to, again, keep the comparisons, consistent. So scrolling down, I'm on the last 30 days. It's been about 30 days since the NBA playoffs tipped off. And scrolling down, obviously, Grant Williams, probably not a surprise here to see Grant Williams at the top, up 31% on his cards. He obviously had that huge Game 7, I think 7 3-pointers, really was kind of the difference in that game for the Celtics, really blowing out the Bucks in Game 7. Not necessarily a guy that I'd be buying right now. Grant Williams, to me, doesn't scream a huge upside, especially on a team that already has two other superstars in Tatum and Jalen Brown. So, seeing some love right now in his card prices, would I be buying? No, I'd be a sell on Grant Williams at this time. Jordan Poole up 16%, continuing to see love. This is a guy who obviously has seen his card prices in general go up significantly this year. And then we look at Jayson Tatum. It's really fun watching. I guess you've got Tatum here at plus 14% and then Luka right behind him at plus 8%. It's really fun seeing how this year seems like a changing of the guard in the NBA. It seems like we're, watching the next generation officially take over. There was a big, kind of letdown with the Lakers not even making it into the playoffs, and then with the Nets, who were the other preseason, betting favorites, getting upset, absolutely trounced in the first round. And so you see this handoff happening to the next generation of superstars sort of definitively here with, Luka. Obviously, you had Booker in the previous round. You've got Jayson Tatum. You've got all these young superstars. You've got Tyler Hero, who's still playing that kind of sixth-man role, but exciting to see what happens with his career. And so scrolling down the list a little bit more, Joker seeing some love, still up 8%, likely because of that MVP award, back-to-back MVPs. It'll be really interesting to see how he does next year. It's been a long time since we had an MVP 3 years in a row. I don't know if he's going to be able to do that. It seems like there's kind of voter fatigue at that point. And then Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler is having an absolutely incredible playoff run. It seems like, you had Sunday Tiger Woods. You get him through the first 3 rounds, and then nobody wanted Tiger even within smelling distance of the leaderboard because you get Sunday Tiger and all of a sudden he's turning it on. That's Jimmy Butler in the playoffs. We saw what he did a couple of years ago when they made that finals push and he was just sweaty and playing 42 minutes a game. He hasn't even had to do that. He's just been incredibly efficient, obviously a really good two-way player, and potentially, honestly, the best performer so far in the playoffs. And then scrolling down, you've got Steph Curry at up 3%. Now, after that, it's downhill. And this is what I talked about in that video that I did previewing the playoffs. And we'll put the link to that video up here so that you can go back and watch that. I went through and I kind of highlighted historical trends in the past. What typically happens to general prices when the playoffs start until, when the playoffs end. And no surprises, once players get bounced, their prices go down. And so there's a potential buying opportunity if you're high on some of those players, if you really like them. Whether you're collecting them or trying to turn a profit on them going into next season, there's a really strong buying window usually within, up to the first month after they get bounced from the playoffs. So scrolling down, mostly flat on some of these guys. Surprised to see Brunson not up at all. Obviously, he's had a really strong playoffs and has been a huge part of the reason why Dallas is, in the position that they're in. Bam, and then let's just keep scrolling. Tyler Hero down 5%. Jalen Brown, he actually hasn't looked spectacular. At times on defense, he hasn't looked as strong as he has in the past, in my opinion. And he's been shooting really inconsistently, but depending on what happens with the Celtics, and he still obviously plays a huge role for that team, that could rebound. Trey down 9%. Wiggins is a guy that personally I wasn't ever really super high on with the Warriors, only because I felt like he was lost in the shuffle. I felt like he was lost behind Steph and Clay, and that would be bad enough. And now with the emergence of Jordan Poole, you can only have so many spotlights on different players. Wiggins, to me, isn't the guy who's going to be this compelling fan favorite, commanding high premiums on his cards. And then this is where it starts to get a little bit uglier. Durant down 10%. Now that doesn't tell the whole picture because Durant's down massively this last season. If there's one thing that I had the most wrong in the last year, one thing, it was Kevin Durant prices. I was incredibly high on Kevin Durant going into this year. They looked so awesome last year. I thought, they're going to tear up everybody in the East and be strong contenders. I thought his card prices would have done the opposite what they did this year. And then CP3, what is this going to do for his legacy when, this could be his last hurrah? We keep saying that. He obviously keeps himself in absolute tip-top, peak performance. He eats clean. He's kind of the Tom Brady of basketball in that way. But yet another flop for Chris Paul. What does that mean for his legacy? He's still going to be considered one of the top 5 point guards of all time when this is all said and done. But like John Stockton, my favorite player, no title yet, at least for Chris Paul. And then Embiid, man, the guy who just absolutely carried that team on his back. Not enough, down 16%. Kyrie, who knows what's going to happen with the rest of his career. Ant-Man and Karl Anthony Towns, his teammate, down. And then just jumping over, we've got a handful of others. Siakam down 20%. James Harden and Devin Booker down 21 and 22% respectively. For different reasons, I would say. Harden obviously just an absolute no-show in that final game for the Sixers when they got eliminated, and especially in the second half. And Devin Booker, he had a great playoffs, honestly. He had a really strong end of the year and great playoffs, but they lost, and that was a lot of fun watching he and Luka kind of sparring and going back and forth. And finally, Demar Derozan. What are people going to think about Demar Derozan? They were so high on him this year. He was the guy earlier this year whose prices had gone up so much. And that's a big reason why he's down so much. I think it's leveled off. People don't know what to think. Chicago's definitely going to be making some moves this offseason. If you like DeRozan as a player, if you think that he's still got a lot left in the tank for his career, could be a buying opportunity here. So that is what's going on with the NBA. Let's jump over and take a look at what's going on the ice with hockey. And I'm going to switch views here. I showed you this when I did the hockey video. Again, we'll link to that video also up here in the corner if you want to check that one out. But I did that hockey preview, and I worked with Leon from my team to build out this playoff market pulse index, the 2022 NHL Playoffs Index. Again, you can view that index. If you go to that video, we had that link right in the show notes, in the show description. You can view this publicly even if you're not a Market Movers member. And I think unsurprisingly, I showed this last year with the data since the playoffs began on May 2nd, down. This index is actually down 11% collectively. A lot of that will have to do with players getting bounced. If I scroll down, you can see, really, if I just sort this, you're going to see Austin Matthews down the most. He had the most to gain and the most to lose, probably, down 33%. Adam Fox, who actually had a really strong first round. I caught some flack in the hockey video for not mentioning Adam Fox in the same breath as Cale Makar and others. He certainly is one of the best defenders, especially offensively generating defenders in the NHL. And kind of just scrolling down, it's like, man, a lot of these guys' prices are down. Let's flip the switch and see who's actually gone up. And it's pretty much Cale, up 14%, and Tarasenko, up pretty much flat, 4%. Everybody else hasn't sold, meaning their young guns just haven't sold in this time frame yet, or they're down. And that's frankly kind of surprising to me to see on some of these key players who have been doing really well. So that's kind of what's been going on with hockey. And actually, if I resort this, you'll see, so we've got Ovechkin down 18%. We've got Austin Matthews. Let me hit this one more time. I wanted to show you kind of what's been going on. We talked about Mitch Marner and how he was going to need to show up, and it was just another collapse by the Leafs. Really concerned about what could happen to Marner's prices, more than Matthews, honestly, going into next year. But again, if you're high on him, he's still very young. He's a local guy in Ontario. Could still be a good buying opportunity. But this is where it gets surprising for me. Nathan McKinnon, down 22%. And they're still in it. And Colorado are still the favorites to win. And Colorado absolutely obliterated everybody in the first round. And McKinnon had a really nice first round. I don't have his exact stats, but I know he was, scoring and facilitating a lot of assists. Not surprising maybe to see some of these other guys, Ovechkin, Stamkos. Obviously, you still got the Lightning in the playoffs and up 1-0 as of recording this. Shesterkin had that legendary first game performance. He did get scored on in that first round by Pittsburgh, but ultimately, he did enough, and he had a respectable save percentage in the series in spite of giving up a lot of goals just by the number of shots he was having put on net. And then Connor McDavid, 14 points in the first round. I think one of 7 or 8 players in history to do that in a playoff round. 14 points, and he's down 9%. And Edmonton's in this, going to be in this battle with Calgary. So will be really interesting to track and see what's going on. Go and check out this market pulse for yourself. Save it in your bookmarks in your browser, even if you're not a member, and you can track what's going on with these hockey cards over time. All right, let's switch over and go to baseball. Now the season teed off back on April 7th. We had that little bit of delay, a bigger scare, frankly. We didn't know what was going to happen with baseball. And thankfully, they've been playing, and it's been a pretty exciting season so far. So jumping over here, I'm still on Market Pulse. And what I've done is I'm comparing 2 indexes or indices, depending on which you prefer. I've got the baseball 2018 to 2020 index, and then I've got the baseball 2010 to 2017 index. And these are comprised of rookie cards, which is why you don't see some of the newer ones. We're looking for more history being baked into these indexes before we add in like 2021 and 2022, for example. But both of these down also, down 9% and down 22% on the even more ultra-modern index. So in general, we've seen this in the past. I talked about this in past videos for baseball previews. Once the season tees off, the prices tend to start coming down, except for a few select players. And so what I've done, obviously, these are comprised of all of them. It's a great macro view. Let's jump back to price movements by player. And I've kind of put into this filter kind of different thing. The players who were expected to do the best, I kind of cheated and went and just looked at the preseason fantasy baseball ranking, top 25 O-rank type players, put them in here. And then I slotted in some of the others like Taylor Ward, Brian Hayes, and a handful of others, Jeremy Pena, who have actually been having really good seasons. And I'm looking at last 60 days here. We're kind of on an in-between since the season began at 45, so I'm looking at last 60. Scrolling down, Manny Machado having an absolutely fantastic season. He's probably, I think he's got to be the MVP favorite in the NL right now. Jordan, Taylor Ward kind of coming out of nowhere. Ride that train while you can. I think there's kind of a debate right now. Like if you have Taylor Ward cards, should you send them off to get graded because they're low population and you could, make money? Only if you think he's going to stay hot. The grading company turnaround times have been really pretty good, pretty respectable in recent months. But if you really are like, I don't know what's going to happen with this guy, if he can really stay out, if he's really the real deal, maybe you sell your raw cards now. But he is up 28% in the last 60 days. Nice to see Giancarlo Stanton having a rebound, unless you're a Yankees hater. I'm kind of agnostic on the Yankees, and he's having a really strong really strong season. It's always just been a question of health with Stanton and with his teammate Aaron Judge. Both of them having absolutely fantastic seasons. Judge he's probably in the early MVP conversation, but he is being overshadowed by a few guys, and we'll get to them in a moment. Scrolling down, you've always got Jose Ramirez doing Jose Ramirez things. He's like the guy that flies under the radar because he's on Cleveland, I think, but he is an absolute gamer. Byron Buxton, lots of conversation. I brought him up before the season saying, if Byron Buxton can stay healthy, he's one of the 5 best players in baseball, especially at least behind the plate. He can do everything. He's incredibly fast. He can steal bases, and he's got power for days. He has missed time. I have him on my fantasy team. I took a chance on a lot of guys this year, like Buxton, hoping that he would stay healthy. And he's had games where he's had to sit because of wrist tightness and other things. But when he's playing, he is absolutely, absolutely killing it. You got Matt Olson, Jose Altuve, Xander Bogaerts all up, in a pretty nice margin, 10 to 14%. And then Jeremy Pena up 9%. He's kind of come out of nowhere, and at least that's what some people would think. If you're holding his Bowman cards from a few years ago, you should definitely consider maybe making a move on those. Or if you really believe he's the next guy up in Houston, send them off and get them graded, and then we start getting into the negatives. And this is where I start getting really surprised with some of these numbers. Nolan Arenado, down 1%. He's in the NL MVP conversation for sure. He's having a fantastic season. Bryce Harper, also in that conversation, down 2%. He won the MVP last year. He's won multiple MVPs, and he's going to be right there in that conversation with Machado, at least up to this point. Shohei, he's had a strong season, not as strong as last year. He hasn't come out of the gate as hot. He's still got the power. He's pitching relatively well. He's had a few games that weren't as strong, but down 5%. Bregman down 6%. And this is the one that really confuses me. Mike Trout down 8%. Mike Trout's down 8%. Of any player that I would say going into a season, I'd be looking and saying, okay, I just want to know that he's going to be healthy and doing Mike Trout things, because at this point it's about his long-term legacy as much or more as it is about how he's doing this particular season or generating stats. He's got like a 1.13 OPS, 10 home runs, leading major leagues in WAR, depending on which WAR calculation you look at. He's right there with Machado, 2.6, 2.7, something like that. Already well on his way to another 8 or 9 or even 10 WAR season. And the Angels are having success. The Angels are playing really well. They've got offense being generated by Trout, Ohtani, Ward, and others. They're having a really good season. I'm really surprised to see Mike Trout down 8%. And of any of these guys, I think that's probably the guy I'd be looking at potentially buying, especially with broader economic situations, recession concerns. If I'm putting my money into a player, I'm going to put it into Mike Trout right now before I put it into Grant Williams, that's for sure. Brian Hayes, he's also having a pretty nice season. I think by all accounts, meeting or exceeding expectations this year, down 8%. Julio Rodriguez, not coming out of the gate as hot as people had expected and hoped for the Mariners. Vladdy down 10%, Acuna down 13%, Soto off to a slow start, which he's been prone to do. Keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on Soto. Almost every year it seems like he comes out slow. As we ramp up to the All-Star game, it seems like, I don't know if it's the second half of the season or the heat or what, he turns it on, so keep an eye on him. Kyle Tucker's been playing better recently. And Mookie Betts is on a tear. Mookie Betts is starting to turn it on. He's that number 2 guy in terms of overall career WAR being generated right behind Trout. He's having a decent season, and again, he's hot lately. I'm going to be keeping an eye on him closely. Bichette, starting to show some signs of life. He's a guy that if you've watched past videos, I really like Bichette. I think he's got a lot of upside and potential. Lou Bob, another guy who's turning it on. And then we get down to the bottom of the list. Unfortunately, my boy Spencer Torkelson for the Tigers, who got the call up, which is exciting. Maybe should have gotten a few more at-bats down in AAA. Maybe should have stayed down there a little bit longer. Was talking to Hammer on our team, and he said there's a lot, about, kind of these studies happening of how many bats you need to get really at a lower level before you can come up and compete for really strong players. So I'm still high on my Tigers. Hopefully he and Riley Green can generate some momentum. It's nice to see Miggy having a pretty respectable season later in his career. But that's kind of your baseball update. So the last thing I wanted to do was to zoom back in on 6 of these marquee players in these different leagues. So I'll jump over to popular card charts. I'm looking at the last 30 days here, and I've charted this, and then we'll just scroll down and kind of compare the stats. I've got Tatum, Luka, Trout, Draisaitl, McDavid, and Nathan McKinnon. So 3 hockey, 2 basketball, and the baseball guy. And I've got Tatum up 15%, Luka up 8%, and then everybody else down. And this is what I find really interesting. McKinnon down 29%, McDavid down 18%, Draisaitl down 17%. Is there opportunity with these hockey guys? If you're high on these 2 teams, if you're high on the Avalanche to win, maybe to scoop one and hope that it remains to be seen. I did point out in that hockey video that the buying period, the buying window for most of these guys is right at that 30-day mark after the Stanley Cup playoffs wrap up. So that's your market update. Just kind of sharing my thoughts, my observations. Feel free to agree or disagree with me down in the comments. If you enjoyed this, I hope you will like the video. Make sure you're subscribed to our channel and hit that little bell icon so that you can be notified every time. And if you're interested in trying Market Movers, as always, visit marketmoversapp.com and use promo code TRIAL for 7 days, absolutely risk-free. Until next time, happy investing.